Billionaire saw his father crying in the maid's arms. Then she revealed a shocking secret that changed everything. "Get away from him, you filthy scum." The voice cracked through the golden atrium of the sprawling Lancaster estate like a whip. Outside, thunder rolled across the Los Angeles skyline, lightning flashing against the tall windows, shadows stretching across marble floors and chandeliers trembling with each rumble. Inside, a storm of its own was brewing, far more dangerous than anything in the sky above. But before we continue, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because what unfolds next is a storm of betrayal, power, and truth you will never forget. Now let's dive into this story. Victoria Lancaster, wife of the billionaire heir Daniel Lancaster, stormed into the hall in a gown of crimson silk, her heels clicking sharp as knives against the polished marble. Her eyes were blazing with fury, and the wineglass in her hand trembled not from fear, but from the violent rage building in her veins. Across the room, a sight froze her heart in cold fury. Her father-in-law, Edward Lancaster, the patriarch of the family, a man once feared in boardrooms and battlefields alike, was curled in the arms of a maid, not just any maid. A maid who had been quietly serving this household for years, someone Victoria despised because she carried dignity in silence. The maid's name was Ana Reyes. 32 years old, quiet, unassuming, with a strength that radiated without her speaking a word. She had been tending to Edward for months now, ever since his health declined from a mix of Parkinson's and grief. He barely spoke to anyone, but tonight, his frail hands clung to Anna's uniform, like a child gripping the last anchor in a storm. His tears slid down his wrinkled cheeks, soaking into the fabric of her apron, as though he trusted no one else in the world but her. Victoria's fury boiled over. The sight of a billionaire legend, her husband's father, clinging to a servant as though she were family, made her chest tighten with venom. She advanced, the storm outside roaring behind her like an ally. Anna held her ground. She didn't move, though her hands trembled slightly as she curled her arms tighter around Edward, shielding him from the firestorm charging their way. Edward's eyes, steel blue and heavy with the battles of his long life, locked on Victoria. They were haunted eyes, desperate eyes. He whispered faintly, but his voice carried more weight than the thunder outside. "Please don't leave me." The old man's words sliced through the silence, but they only added gasoline to Victoria's rage. She hissed, her voice dripping with poison. "He's not your father. He's not even your burden to carry. You're nothing more than a mop with legs in this house. Move aside." Anna's lips quivered, but she did not move. Her voice, soft yet firm, rose above the storm. "He asked me to stay." She held Edward tighter as his thin fingers clutched at her sleeve, his sobs growing weaker but sharper with every breath. Victoria's laugh was sharp, cruel, hollow. The glass in her hand shook as she raised it, her nails digging into the stem, and then, in one violent motion, she hurled it across the room. The crystal flew, carrying red wine like blood across the air. Time slowed. Anna turned instinctively, wrapping her body around Edward, her back arched like a shield. The glass shattered against her arm with a sickening crack, exploding into shards that scattered across the marble floor. The wine streaked down her skin, mixing with the fresh cut on her arm. Edward flinched, his frail body trembling, but it was Anna who took the hit, Anna who bore the pain in silence. For a moment, the entire estate seemed to hold its breath. Then footsteps echoed from the far corridor. Daniel Lancaster, the billionaire's son, strode in wearing his tailored navy suit, a briefcase still in hand. His face froze as the scene unfolded before him. His father was sobbing, clinging to the maid. The maid's arm was bleeding, crimson dripping onto the flawless white rug, and his wife stood smiling, her chest rising and falling with twisted satisfaction. The silence collapsed into chaos. Victoria spun around, crocodile tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank God you're here, Daniel," she attacked him. "Your father." She pointed at Anna with trembling hands, her voice cracking like glass under pressure. "Look at the blood. She's dangerous." She's manipulative. She's always been a vulture circling your father." Daniel's jaw tightened as his eyes darted between the three of them. His father broken, his wife shrieking, and the maid wounded but silent. Anna pressed her sleeve against her arm, wincing as crimson bloomed across the fabric. Her voice, when it came, was trembling but steady enough to cut through the storm. "That's not true," she threw it. "I protected him." But Victoria's voice was louder, shriller, drowning her out with calculated hysteria. "She's lying. She's always lied. You've given her too much freedom in this house. Look at her, clinging to him like she belongs here. She doesn't." Daniel crouched beside his father, ignoring the war of voices for a moment. His father's trembling hand lifted, fragile as a dry leaf in autumn. His fingers shook as they pointed toward Anna. His lips barely moved, but his whisper was unmistakable. "She saved me." But the voice was faint, so faint that Daniel himself wondered if he had truly heard it. Victoria seized the moment, her hands flying to her face, sobs breaking free in perfect theatrical timing. "He doesn't know what he's saying, Daniel. He's confused. His mind is gone. You can't trust a word." She lunged forward, wrapping herself around Daniel's arm. "Please, send her away. For your father's safety. For our safety." Anna stood still, her face pale, her lips pressed tight to stop them from trembling. She looked directly at Daniel, her eyes brimming with both pain and defiance. She didn't plead. She didn't beg. She whispered only one thing: "I did nothing wrong." And then Daniel made the decision that would haunt him. His voice was heavy, uncertain, but it carried authority. "Anna, leave the room." Her breath caught in her throat. Her shoulders stiffened, but she obeyed. Without another word, she turned, cradling her injured arm against her chest, and walked down the endless corridor. Her footsteps echoed like final verdicts, growing fainter with each step until only silence remained. Daniel stood rooted in place, his wife still clutching him, his father still trembling, his heart pounding with confusion. Somewhere deep inside, something told him this wasn't the truth. Something told him he had just made a mistake that would cost him more than he could ever imagine. But for now, all he could do was watch the door close behind Anna and feel the storm outside crash in unison with the storm that had just begun inside his home. The night settled heavy over the Lancaster estate, but inside its gilded walls there was no peace. Daniel Lancaster paced the master suite, the weight of the evening pressing down on him like an iron anchor. His wife, Victoria, lounged in a satin robe on the chaise, her tears gone, replaced by the cool satisfaction of someone who believed she had won. But Daniel couldn't sleep. The image of Anna's arm splitting open as the glass struck her, the way she shielded his father without hesitation, replayed in his mind like a film he couldn't shut off. Edward Lancaster had been restless all night. His sobs had finally faded into the shallow breathing of a man too tired to keep fighting. Daniel stood in the doorway of his father's suite, watching him under the dim glow of a bedside lamp. His father's hand twitched in sleep, curling into the empty space where Anna should have been. The sight sliced into Daniel's chest. He had dismissed her, ordered her away, and now the old man looked more fragile than ever. Downstairs, in the servants' quarters, Anna sat alone on a narrow bed, her forearm wrapped in gauze she had tied herself. Her body trembled from the pain, but her spirit trembled harder from the injustice. Every whisper of the staff echoed in her ears. Some called her foolish, others pitied her, but no one dared defend her. Her phone buzzed with messages from her younger brother back in Atlanta, asking for money to pay for their mother's chemotherapy. She stared at the cracked screen, her eyes wet. What would she tell him? That she had just lost her job for protecting the man who needed her most? Falling. The storm outside had moved east, but inside the Lancaster home the air was charged, ready to explode. At breakfast the next morning, Victoria played her part perfectly. She smiled, poured Daniel's coffee, leaned in to kiss his cheek. She looked every bit the devoted wife, but her words cut like blades cloaked in silk. "Darling, about last night. We need to be more careful. That woman can't be trusted. She's been manipulating your father for months. If we let her stay, she'll poison him against us." Daniel said nothing. He only stirred his coffee, his eyes dark, his jaw tight. He could still hear his father's faint whisper. "She saved me." Later that day, unable to silence his unease, Daniel found himself in the security room of the estate, a place he rarely visited. Blue screens glowed in the dim light, each one showing footage from cameras scattered across the property. He scrolled back to the previous night, his heart pounding faster with each rewind. And then he saw it. Victoria's arm swinging, the glass flying, Anna shielding his father with her body. He froze the frame, leaned in close. The truth was undeniable. His wife had lied. Anna had told the truth. His hands shook as he replayed it again, again, again. Shame rose in his throat like bile. He had sided with a lie. He had cast out the only person who had protected his father. Meanwhile, Anna walked down a rain-slick Los Angeles street, her small suitcase dragging behind her. The Lancaster mansion shrank behind her like a bad dream she couldn't wake from. She had nowhere to go. Her savings were nearly gone, her family needed her, and the wound on her arm throbbed with each step. Still, she kept her chin high. She had done nothing wrong. That thought was the only anchor she had left. But Daniel couldn't let it rest. That evening, while Victoria entertained guests in the drawing room with her flawless smile and laughter that masked poison, Daniel slipped away. He drove his black Maserati through the storm-washed streets until he found the diner on the corner of East Hollywood, where one of the staff said they had seen Anna. Sure enough, there she was. Sitting alone at a booth, her hair damp from the rain, her arms still wrapped in makeshift bandages, her eyes staring blankly into a mug of coffee she couldn't afford to refill. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight. She looked smaller somehow, but not defeated, like a soldier stripped of armor but not of spirit. He stepped inside, his presence filling the small diner, drawing curious stares. Anna looked up, her eyes widening, her body stiffening. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of neon lights and clinking of spoons filled the silence between them. Finally, Daniel slid into the booth across from her. "Anna," he said, his voice low, almost broken. She didn't look at him. She gripped her mug tighter. "I don't work for you anymore, Mr. Lancaster." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not here as your employer. I'm here as a man who made a mistake." Her eyes flicked up at him, guarded, full of hurt. "A mistake?" Her voice trembled. "You stood there while she called me a liar. You told me to leave. You believed her over me. And now you want to call it a mistake?" Daniel swallowed hard. "I saw the footage. The cameras. They caught everything. You were telling the truth. She threw the glass. You protected him. And I—" his voice cracked. "I betrayed you." Anna's lip quivered, but she said nothing. The pain in her silence spoke louder than words. Daniel reached into his coat and slid an envelope across the table. "This is a contract. Full reinstatement. Triple your salary. Medical coverage for your mother. And your own suite next to my father's room." Anna stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. "Why?" she whispered. "Out of guilt?" "No," Daniel said firmly, leaning forward. "Because my father trusts you. And now I know why. You saved him, and I need you to stay by his side. Not just for him, but for me, because I can't do this without you." Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. She finally reached for the envelope, her fingers trembling. "You don't know everything, Mr. Lancaster," she said softly. "There are things about your family, about your father, that you're not ready to hear." Daniel froze, his heartbeat loud in his ears. "Then tell me." Anna shook her head. "Not yet. Not here. Some truths are heavier than betrayal. Some truths destroy more than they heal." She stood, tucking the envelope under her arm. "I'll come back. For him. But the rest, you're not ready for." Daniel rose as she turned to leave, his voice raw. "Will I ever be?" Anna paused, her back to him, her shoulders squared with quiet strength. "You will. When the truth decides you're ready. She walked out into the rain, her figure disappearing into the blur of neon lights and wet streets. Daniel stood there in the diner, his fists clenched, his mind spinning with questions. For the first time in his life, power and wealth meant nothing. The only thing that mattered now was the truth, and the woman who carried it. The Lancaster mansion gleamed in the morning light, but beneath its polished marble floors and towering crystal chandeliers, tension rippled like a live wire ready to snap. When Anna stepped back through the grand entrance, suitcase in hand, the entire household froze. Whispers surged through the air like a sudden storm. "She's back?" one maid muttered, clutching her dusting cloth. "I thought she was fired." Another hissed, eyes darting toward the staircase where Victoria often descended like royalty. "She crossed Mrs. Lancaster," the butler whispered. "No one survives that." Anna ignored them all. She walked with quiet dignity, her black coat clinging damply from the rain, her bandaged arm hidden beneath the sleeve. Every step echoed against the marble, and though she carried no weapon, no shield, her presence alone sliced through the atmosphere like a blade. She was no longer a servant returning to work. She was something more, something untouchable. At the top of the staircase, Victoria appeared. Draped in a silk robe, a wine glass in her hand despite the early hour, she froze mid-step when her eyes landed on Anna. Shock flared across her face before it hardened into venom. "You!" The word hissed from her lips, sharp and cold. "Who let you in this house?" Anna met her gaze without flinching. "Mr. Lancaster did." At that moment, Daniel appeared from the study, his voice cutting through the charged air like thunder. "I let her in, and she's not leaving again." His tone was firm, commanding, a man used to being obeyed. Every servant turned their head. Every whisper died instantly. Victoria's laugh was brittle, desperate. "You can't be serious. After everything, she's manipulating you, Daniel. She's always manipulating him." Daniel descended the staircase, his presence towering, his fury simmering beneath his calm. "I saw the footage, Victoria! I saw what you did." Anna didn't lie. "She saved my father from you." Gasps broke out among the staff. The truth was out, undeniable, and it rolled through the mansion like a shockwave. Victoria's mask cracked, her fingers tightening around the glass until it threatened to shatter. "She's twisting you! Don't you see? She's after everything. Your father's inheritance, your trust, your money." Daniel's voice rose, a whip of fire. "No, Victoria. She's the only person in this house who hasn't lied, hasn't betrayed, hasn't clawed for power. You, on the other hand, forged my father's signature, siphoned funds, and nearly killed the only person willing to protect him." The glass slipped from her trembling hand, crashing against the marble, red wine splattering like blood across the floor. The silence that followed was suffocating. Anna's gaze was steady, but inside her chest her heart thundered. She wanted to scream her truth, to tear the mask from Victoria's face in front of them all, but she held back. She knew the deeper secret, the one that could shatter Daniel's world forever, was not hers to tell. Not yet. Edward Lancaster's voice broke the silence. Weak but firm, it carried from the far corridor as he was wheeled forward by a young footman. "Enough!" His thin frame looked smaller than ever in the chair, but his steel blue eyes burned bright. "She stays. And you?" He fixed his gaze on Victoria. "You leave!" The staff gasped. Victoria's mouth fell open. "You can't banish me. I'm your son's wife." Edward's voice cracked like a whip. "You're nothing but poison in this house, and I will not watch you destroy what's left of my family." Victoria's face contorted, but she saw the writing on the wall. Without Daniel's protection, she had no ground to stand on. She turned on her heel, her silk robe whipping behind her, and stormed out, her fury echoing through the vast halls. The moment the doors slammed shut, a breath seemed to release across the mansion. Servants exchanged looks, some relieved, others fearful of the storm that would surely follow. Daniel crouched beside his father, guilt written all over his face. "I should have believed you. I should have protected you." Edward reached out a trembling hand, laying it on his son's. "You can still make it right. His gaze shifted toward Anna. She is the only one who has never abandoned me. Daniel turned to Anna then, his eyes filled with something raw, guilt, gratitude, something deeper he couldn't yet name. Stay, he said softly, not as staff, as family. Her lips parted in shock, but before she could answer, Edward's breathing grew shallow. The old man clutched his chest, his frail body trembling. Panic erupted. Servants rushed. Daniel shouted for the doctor, and Anna fell to her knees beside him, her hand pressing the oxygen mask over his mouth. "Stay with me, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling but fierce. "Stay." Edward's eyes flickered, locking onto hers. His lips moved, his voice faint but clear enough for her alone. "Tell him, before it's too late." Her heart stopped. "Not now. Not like this." She shook her head. "No, sir. You tell him. You have to." But Edward's eyes rolled back, and the monitors blared. The room spun into chaos as medics rushed in. Daniel held his father's hand, his voice breaking. "Dad! Please!" The medics worked, the mansion filled with the sound of orders barked, machines humming, servants crying. After endless minutes, Edward stabilized, his chest rising shallowly again. Relief swept through the room, but the shadow of death lingered like a ghost in the air. Later, when the chaos quieted, Anna stood alone in the dim hallway, her arm pressed against the cool wall. Edward's words echoed in her mind like a drumbeat she couldn't silence. Tell him before it's too late. She had carried this secret for years, sworn by loyalty, bound by love. But now the weight of it threatened to crush her. She knew the truth could destroy Daniel's entire world. It could unravel everything he believed about his family, his legacy, his very identity. And yet, the storm was already here. Victoria was gone, but her shadow lingered. Whispers would spread, lies would fester, and the truth was a bomb waiting to explode. Anna knew it was only a matter of time before Daniel demanded answers. And when he did, she would have to choose between loyalty and devastation, silence and salvation. The Lancaster estate slept uneasily that night, its marble halls echoing with ghosts. But in the servants' quarters, Anna sat awake, her hands trembling around a letter she had written years ago, a letter Edward had told her to keep safe, a letter that could break Daniel's heart or set him free. And somewhere across the city, Victoria sat in a dark limousine, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was sharp, venomous. "He thinks he can cast me out? He hasn't seen the last of me. I'll burn that house to the ground before I let her take my place." The fire wasn't over. It was only beginning. Victoria's limousine carved through the night like a blade of shadow, headlights slicing across the Los Angeles skyline. Her silk robe was gone, replaced by a fitted black suit that clung to her fury as tightly as the leather seat. The wine glass had slipped from her hand earlier that day, but in her mind, she still heard it shatter over and over, like her grip on the Lancaster Empire. She clenched her phone so hard, her manicured nails dug into her palm. "They think they can exile me?" she hissed into the receiver. "Daniel thinks he can strip me of everything I've built? No, I built this life brick by brick, lie by lie, and no maid is going to replace me." The voice on the other end was calm, chilling. "Then we bring the house down, quietly, piece by piece." Her lips curved into a cruel smile. "Good. Start with the foundation. I want every secret, every buried skeleton. And when I'm finished, they'll beg me to return." Back at the Lancaster estate, shadows stretched long across the marble floors as the night deepened. Daniel stood in the dim glow of the security room, the monitors casting cold blue light over his face, footage replayed endlessly, the wine glass arcing, the shards exploding, the maid shielding his father with her own body. He pressed a hand to his forehead, shame burning his veins. He had cast Anna out like trash, doubted her when she was the only one brave enough to stand between chaos and his father. And worse, the words Edward had whispered before collapsing haunted him. "Tell him before it's too late." Tell him what? He glanced toward the east wing, where Anna now rested in the guest suite he had personally assigned to her. For hours, she hadn't come out. For hours, he hadn't dared to knock. But the storm raging inside him grew louder. In her room, Anna sat at the edge of the bed, the letter Edward had entrusted to her years ago, trembling in her hands. She had read it 100 times, but tonight the words felt heavier than ever. If I am gone, and Daniel is still blind, give him this. The truth he deserves, even if it destroys him. Her tears blurred the ink, but she couldn't let them fall. Edward's heartbeat was faint now, his health slipping away like sand through a fist. She knew the time for silence was ending, yet she feared what her words could ignite. As dawn bled over the horizon, the estate woke to whispers and unease. The staff avoided Anna's gaze, some out of respect, others out of suspicion. She carried herself with dignity, but every look cut her skin like glass. Then came the call. A maid burst into Daniel's study, breathless. "It's Mr. Lancaster. His breathing. He's fading fast." Daniel sprinted down the corridor, his polished shoes pounding against marble. He burst into his father's room to find Anna already there, cradling the frail old man against the pillows, her hands steady on his chest. The monitor's beeps came slow, weak. Edward's eyes fluttered open, thin slits filled with pain and urgency. "Daniel!" he rasped. Daniel dropped to his knees beside the bed, clutching his father's hand. "I'm here, Dad. Don't leave me. Not yet." Edward's gaze slid toward Anna, then back to his son. His lips moved, but the words barely escaped. She knows everything." Daniel turned sharply toward Anna, confusion blazing in his eyes. "What does he mean? What do you know?" Anna's heart slammed against her ribs. She opened her mouth, but Edward's trembling voice rose again. "Tell him, Anna. He deserves the truth. Tell him before I'm gone." The room stilled. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. Anna's hands shook as she reached into her pocket, pulling out the letter. She held it tightly, her voice breaking. This is what he wanted you to know. What I swore to keep until he couldn't anymore." Daniel stared at the sealed envelope, his jaw tightening. "Tell me, now." Her tears spilled freely as she whispered, "You're not who you think you are. Edward, he raised you, loved you, but he is not your biological father." The words detonated like a bomb. Daniel staggered back, the floor beneath him tilting. "What?" Edward's hand twitched, his eyes swimming with guilt. "Your mother. She betrayed me. With my brother. I found out when you were 5. But I couldn't. I couldn't let you grow up without a father. So I chose you as mine." Daniel's breath shattered. Rage and grief collided in his chest. "All these years? You let me live a lie?" Edward's lips trembled. "You were always mine, Daniel, in every way that matters. Blood means nothing compared to love. You are my son." Daniel's fists clenched, his vision burning red. He turned to Anna, voice raw. You knew, and you kept this from me." Anna's tears streamed down her face. "I wanted to protect you. He made me swear. I couldn't break his trust." He backed away, shaking his head, his entire world unraveling. The mansion, the legacy, the fortune, all of it now sat on quicksand. But before the storm of betrayal could consume him, Edward's body convulsed. The monitor screamed. Anna pressed the oxygen mask over his face, her voice urgent. "Stay with us, sir! Please!" Daniel froze, torn between fury and desperation. His father's weak hand reached blindly for his. Instinct overpowered rage. He grasped it tightly. Edward's final words were faint, almost swallowed by the chaos. "Don't let anger blind you, son. Love her. Trust her. She's the key." And then the beeping flatlined. Daniel's world went silent. The man who had raised him, lied to him, protected him, loved him, was gone. The staff wept quietly in the hall. Anna's shoulders shook with grief. But Daniel stood frozen, his soul hollowed out. Then came the sound of high heels clicking against marble. Slow, purposeful, venomous. Victoria stepped into the room. her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Oh, how tragic," she purred, her eyes glittering with triumph. "The mighty Edward Lancaster, gone at last, and his precious secret spilled for everyone to choke on." Daniel's eyes snapped to her, blazing. "What are you doing here?" She stepped closer, her voice dripping with poison. "Watching the empire crumble, of course." "You think you've won, Daniel? You think that Maid will save you? No, she'll ruin you. And when the world learns you're not even a true Lancaster, they'll strip you of everything." Anna's fists clenched at her sides, her fury simmering. But Daniel's grief morphed into something darker, something unyielding. He rose slowly, his eyes locked on Victoria with fire. "You've played your last game, Victoria. This house, this family, this legacy, it's no longer yours to poison." "You're finished," Victoria laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut glass. "We'll see. Secrets don't die with the dead, Daniel. They live on, and when I'm done, yours will bury you." The storm had broken. Edward was gone. The truth was out, and the battle for the Lancaster Empire had only just begun. And that, family, is where tonight's storm ends, but only for now. Edward Lancaster is gone. Daniel's world has been shattered by a secret buried for decades. And Victoria? She's still out there, smiling in the shadows, plotting her next strike. Do you think Daniel will survive this truth? Or will Victoria tear down everything his father built before he even has the chance to protect it? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. I want to know what you would do if you uncovered a secret like this in your family. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, the next chapter will be even more shocking than this one, because sometimes the people closest to you aren't just family. They're the very storms that can destroy you.